Listen, I didn't know I had a trigger problem until I saw myself in someone else. Now, there are some things about yourself that are hard to see when you're the one that's doing them. Now, I learned that about my triggers some time ago, and for a long time, I knew there were certain things people could say or do that would set me off. And when I say set me off, I mean, my emotions could go from 0 to 100 very quickly. And it wasn't everybody. Everybody couldn't get that type of reaction out of me. If I didn't have an emotional connection to you, there was a good chance I didn't care enough about what you said or did for it to even affect me that deeply. That's just the Scorpio in me. But the people I loved, that was different. Their words could just hit places other people's words couldn't even reach. Their actions, they could make me angry or defensive, hurt, or emotional before I had even figured out exactly what I was feeling. And for a long time, I thought I was reacting to what was happening in the moment. Then one day I saw someone in my family react to something in a way that felt very familiar. I watched the emotion and was like, whoa. The intensity, the defensiveness, the way the reaction became bigger than the whole entire situation itself. And I remember thinking, oh my God, do I look like that? It stopped me dead in my tracks because I recognized it, not just in them, in me. I knew that reaction all too well. And I knew that energy. I knew what it felt like just to be inside of it. But seeing it from the outside was completely different. And I didn't like what I saw. That doesn't mean, though, that I thought that this person was terrible. I just meant I finally had a mirror, something we don't recognize our own patterns, until we actually see them walking around in somebody else's body. That moment just made me want to understand mine even more so. I didn't want to just keep being explosive. That crap felt toxic. I didn't even like the way I handled my emotions when I was triggered. I didn't like feeling as though someone else's words or their behavior could flip a switch inside me. And I especially didn't like what happened when the person triggering me was somebody that I love. So, because if you think about it, an unhealed Scorpio, they can be reckless with their mouth. We can say some things we can't come back from because once triggered, it can feel like the problem is obvious. They did this. They said that. They know I didn't like that. They should know better. And maybe they did do something wrong. But understanding your triggers doesn't mean excusing someone else's behavior. That's important. Sometimes somebody really did cross a boundary. Sometimes they were disrespectful. Sometimes what they said was insensitive. And sometimes you have every right to be angry. But I had to learn that there are actually two different questions that I needed to really learn. And one of them was, what did they do? And then the second one was, why did what they did create this reaction in me? Those are not the same questions. That second question, it changed everything for me. A trigger is more than the thing that just happened. We use the word triggered pretty casually now. If you hear it, it's the buzzword. Somebody irritates us and we say, we're triggered. Something makes us uncomfortable and we say, we're triggered. But when I started really paying closer attention to my own reactions, I realized something. And that something was that sometimes what happens in the present, it kind of touches something that was already there. Think about it in this way. Someone says something to you. The words themselves may only take 3 seconds to say, but your reaction to those 3 seconds might contain years of emotions. And that's why certain reactions can feel so immediate. Before you've even had time to really think about what happened, your body is already responding to it. Your chest tightens, your heart starts beating real fast, your voice changes, you become defensive, you shut down, you start explaining yourself, you raise your voice, you leave, you cry, you become sarcastic, you say something you regret, or maybe you just become completely silent. The behavior can look different for each person, but underneath it is often the same thing. Something in me believes that I need to protect myself right now. And the question is, protect yourself from what? That's where the real work begins. Your trigger may be older than the moment you're in. One of the biggest things I've learned is that our emotional reactions don't begin in a vacuum. We learn how to respond to the world through our experiences, through childhood, family, relationships, rejection, abandonment, criticism, through even being misunderstood or feeling ignored, or not even feeling safe enough to express ourselves, through watching how the adults around us handled anger, how they handled disappointment, conflict, affection, communications. Sometimes we learn to yell. Sometimes we learn to disappear. Sometimes we just learn to please everybody. And sometimes we learn that being wrong isn't safe. Sometimes we even learn that being ignored means we don't matter. And sometimes we learn that somebody needing space means that they're leaving us. And sometimes we learn that criticism means we're not good enough. And eventually these responses can become so automatic that we stop recognizing them as patterns. We just think that's just how I am. But I started asking myself a different question. Is this really who I am? Or is this something I learned to do? There is a huge difference, because if something was learned, it can be examined. And once it can be examined, you can begin to decide whether you still need it. And that's why I created the Trigger Decoder. The Trigger Decoder wasn't created from the perspective of someone who had never struggled with the emotional reactions. I created it because I needed this work too. I wanted something that would help me to go beyond the trigger, that made me, those things that made me mad, because that made me mad doesn't tell me very much. I wanted to know what exactly happened. What did I feel? What did I immediately assume it meant? What happened in my body? What did I want to do? And what did I actually do? What did this situation remind me of? Was I reacting only to what happened today, or something older? What did I need in that moment? And what could I do differently next time? That is decoding. You're taking something that once felt automatic, slowing it down just enough so that you can see the individual pieces. The trigger is only the beginning. One of the reasons I called it the Trigger Decoder is because identifying the trigger isn't enough. I hate when people ignore me. Okay, why? I hate when someone questions me. Why? I can't stand when somebody changes their tone with me. Why? I get angry when someone doesn't respond to my text. Why? I shut down when someone criticizes me. Why? Not because you're trying to interrogate yourself. You're trying to understand yourself better. There may be a belief underneath the reaction. I'm being rejected. I'm not important. They're trying to control me. They're leaving me. They don't respect me. I'm not being heard. I'm not good enough. I have to defend myself. Now we're getting somewhere, because the event may be happening today while the belief underneath it has been living inside you for years. And what the Trigger Decoder helps you do is the workbook walks you through the process instead of asking you to simply like control your emotions. I don't think telling somebody to calm down teaches them anything. If anything, when you're already triggered, calm down might become trigger number 2. What helped me was learning to become curious about myself. And so the workbook helps you to slow the experience down and look at what actually happened. You begin identifying the event itself, your emotional response, what you felt physically, the meaning you attach to what happened, the beliefs underneath that meaning, and the behavior that followed. Then you can really start looking for patterns. Maybe different situations keep creating the same feeling. Maybe several of your triggers connect back to rejection. Maybe yours connect to abandonment, maybe criticism, maybe control, maybe not feeling heard, maybe just feeling invisible, or maybe feeling disrespected. You may discover that 5 completely different arguments are actually pressing the same emotional button. And that's powerful information, because now you're not trying to fix 5 unrelated problems. You're beginning to understand the wound. You begin to understand the belief or the fear, the expectation or pattern underneath them. The goal isn't to never be triggered again. I want to be clear about this because I think we can turn personal growth into another impossible standard. The goal isn't to become a person who never gets angry. It isn't to never be hurt. It isn't even never become like frustrated. It isn't to even just walk around emotionally untouched by everything. You're human. You're going to have emotions. The work is learning what to do with those emotions. And for me, the goal became creating more space between what happened and what I did next. Even a little more space matters for me because inside that space is a choice. Maybe I don't have to raise my voice. Maybe I can say, give me a minute because I'm getting upset. Or maybe I can ask, what did you mean by that? Instead of deciding what they meant. Or maybe I can recognize that I'm feeling rejected without immediately accusing someone of rejecting me. Maybe I can tell somebody that something hurt me without trying to hurt them back. Or just maybe I can leave the conversation temporarily and return when I can actually communicate what's going on. Now that's growth, not perfection. Sometimes your body knows before your mind does. This was another important part of the process for me. Triggers aren't only thoughts, they're physical. Your body often announces a trigger before your conscious mind has finished processing what just happened. That's why learning your physical warnings, the warning signs, that's why it matters. Maybe your jaw tightens, maybe your stomach drops, maybe your shoulders tense up, or your face gets, hot, or you start talking faster. Maybe your voice gets louder, or maybe you just feel an overwhelming need to explain yourself. Those signals can become information instead of, here we go, I'm mad now. You can eventually learn to recognize something that just happened inside of me I need to pay attention to. That small shift just turns a trigger from an order into information, and information gives you options. I had to stop making triggers everybody else's responsibility. This was probably one of the harder lessons. Other people should respect our boundaries. People who love us should care about how their behavior affects us. We should absolutely speak up when someone treats us badly, but nobody else can do our internal work for us. I couldn't make everybody in my life responsible for making sure I never felt something uncomfortable. And at some point, I had to become responsible for understanding what happened inside of me after the button was pushed. That doesn't, excuse me, I'm sweating to death. But that doesn't let the other person off the hook. It just puts me back in control of myself. There's a difference. That mirror just changed something inside me. I still think about that moment when I watched my family member react and recognize myself in them. It would have been so easy for me to just judge them. But instead, something in me said, pay attention, because I wasn't only watching them, I was being shown something about myself. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I didn't want to. I didn't want to continue moving through relationships, believing that every emotional explosion was simply caused by what somebody else did. I wanted to understand myself better, and I wanted to recognize that what was going on was mine to carry. And I wanted to communicate differently, and I wanted to know what lived underneath my reactions. Most importantly, I wanted a choice, and that's what the trigger decoder represents to me. It isn't about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming aware enough to recognize yourself while the emotion is happening. It's learning to say, I know this feeling, I know what this touches in me, and I know what I normally do next, and this time I can choose something different. That's it. That's all it is. That is what self-awareness can give us. Not a life without triggers, a life where our triggers just no longer get to make every decision for us. And sometimes that journey starts when one uncomfortable question: do I look like that? Mine did. And I'm glad I finally asked. Come on now. You got this.